This is the June meeting of the Harrisburg Zoning Board. Okay. Uh, To the left of me is Ms. Gray, Jim Gray. To the right of me is normally Mr. Hobbs. I think he'll be joining us, and I'm Claude Phipps. Okay, I'm calling the meeting order. From our zoning, our zoning administrator and our planning, director of planning is Mr. Jeffrey Knight. Okay, and from the law office, and I'm going to get your name right one of these days, not yourself, thank you.
Here, sir.
Okay. And our solicitor is Mr. Mike Connors. Okay. We have a court reporter. Since this meeting is a more formalized meeting than the planning commission, which means this meeting has public record, recorded record, and record to be filed, I guess, with the Conter's or office, okay? The court reporter is there because zoning board is a more formal planning, more formal with planning commission. The court reporter makes a transcript in the event of an appeal to the Court of Common Pleas. Zoning hearing board functions like a court of law. Zoning hearing board our decisions must be based off of fact, law, and not the popularity of the project. Okay? In other words, the applicant must meet a legal burden, and we use the municipal codes and the municipal codes and city planning codes for our basis of our decisions. For people in the audience who reside near the properties in question and or have anything legally relevant to say, you will have ample time to speak. Okay? What you speak about needs to be must be germane, must be pertinent to the project that's in question. Okay. I don't think we have any continuations tonight, do we? No continuations. Okay. Okay. So I'm ready to. Any questions? Okay. Also, all testimony will be sworn testimony. Okay, we will swear you in when it comes time to speak. Did I turn it over to Mr. Connors for the first case?
Okay, so it's application 2582, and it is 2201 North Front Street, and I'll read in the exhibits, and then you can swear in the witnesses. Okay, so B1 is a letter sent from the planning director to the applicant notifying of the hearing. B2 is the hearing notice posted on the property. B3, applicant's notification letter and certificate of mailing to required neighbors. B4 is the application. B5 is a narrative to the application with attached photos and plans. B6 is a deed to the property establishing standing to pursue the zoning relief. B7, Planning Bureau case report. B8 is the Planning Commission resolution, and B9 is the proof of publication for tonight's hearing. It was published in Patriot News June 2nd and June 9th. So with that, that is B1 through B9.
Thank you, Mr. Connor. Now we'll have the Director of Planning speak. Jeff, Mr. Knight, would you raise your hand, be sworn in? You swear the testimony you're about to give is factual and truthful?
I do.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Now you can give a synopsis.
Sure. So the application for case number 2582 is a proposal to install a front yard sign on the property at 2201 North Front Street, which is both taller than permitted by right and larger than permitted by right. The zoning code allows freestanding signs 4 feet in height and 8 square feet, and the proposed sign is 4 3/4 feet, and the signage area is 16.4 square feet. So board members may be familiar with this property. It's the King Mansion up on Front Street. The proposal is intended to both expand the enclosed front yard area in front of the building, which often has events such as weddings that occur there, and then also to alter kind of the fence by adding in a stone section which will have the name of the King Mansion, which will be directly visible to those individuals coming down North Front Street. And will be large enough to be both visible and kind of understandable to those driving down. The applicants have provided, a number of documentation regarding the national standards to which this signage is applying with respect to, how big signage needs to be at certain speeds to be able to be reacted to accordingly. This is not just based upon some whims of the applicant. It's heavily predicated upon national standards for safe roadway signage. So with all of that being said, the Planning Commission has recommended that the Zoning Hearing Board approve the request with the following conditions. The applicant must submit the requisite floodplain development permit application for the proposed sign and accompanying fence and wall elements and receive approval from the floodplain administrator. And the applicant must ensure that the signage itself, as determined by the location of the lettering on the sign structure, and that's the masonry kind of frontage on which the signage will be installed, is located at least 5 feet from the public right-of-way along North Front Street. Planning Commission recommends that the Zoning Hearing Board approve the request for the following reasons. The applicant has provided substantial statistical support for the proposed signage based on nationally recognized standards and with a focus on ensuring safe access by those traveling to the property along North Front Street. The zoning relief requests necessary for the installation of the proposed signage are generally minimal and non-intrusive in nature and do not involve aspects such as internal illumination or electronically changing messages, which might have adverse impacts on adjacent properties to the north. The proposed signage is also designed in a complementary manner to the property aesthetics and the riverfront context and does not produce detrimental impacts on the surrounding neighborhood. And finally, the site currently features minimal signage identifying the property or the uses thereon. The proposed sign will be more visible to the general public and will improve site safety and accessibility for visitors, guests, and passersby.
Well, thank you. Now we will have the applicants basically tell us about their project, but first you need to swear. So would you raise your right hand? Swear the testimony and statements you make are going to be true?
I do.
Thank you. And you need to announce your name and your resident.
Yep. Good evening. My name is Esh McCombie. I'm an attorney with McNeese, Wallace & Nerick, 100 Pine Street, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania.
My name is Mark Kurowski. I'm the owner of King Mansion Entertainment, as well as King Mansion Events, 2201 NFS, which is I reside at 1421 North Front Street in the city of Harrisburg.
Thank you. Now, hey, tell us about your project.
Thank you. As Mr. Knight pointed out, we're here to discuss some signage in front of the King Mansion on North Front Street. It's similar to a request I was here with you all before for Harrisburg University and the signs there. I think that at the end of the day, one of the issues we run into with the city's sign ordinance is that it doesn't take into account the size and scope of the property or the building on the property. It doesn't matter whether it's 1/10 of an acre with a 1,000 square foot building or an acre and a half with a 10,000 square foot building. The signage that's allowed is the same. In fact, in this case, this property is several parcels. I think there are 6 parcels total. So under the code, it could have 6 small signs spread out all over the place. That wouldn't look good at a property like this, and we understand that, and so we're more interested in having one slightly larger sign, but that does require 2 variances from section 7-325, attachment 1 for area and height, as Mr. Knight pointed out. Just one witness this evening, but I'll hand out these packets so you guys have something to look at while we work our way through.
Great.
Mark, what's your role or position with 2201 NFS LLC?
I'm the president, CEO, and owner of the company.
Are you also with K&W Engineer Consultants?
Yes, I am.
What's your role or position with K&W?
Similar, I'm the president, owner, and CEO of that company.
Does 2201 NFS own the property we're discussing tonight?
Yes,
When did you acquire it?
June of 2017.
And how's it currently used?
There are a few uses in the building. The first floor is predominantly weddings and event space. Second floor, we do have a professional office, K&W. My engineering business is located there. We also have a gym in the basement, which has a month-to-month tenant for personal training.
Did we secure zoning approvals from this board for those uses in 2017?
Yes, we did.
All right, you could look at the first page. I guess it would be actually be the second page, first after the cover. We'll call that Exhibit A1. Is that okay?
Yep, A1.
What is that?
I believe that's a county tax parcel map with the multiple properties associated with 2201, or I should say owned by 2201 NFS, highlighted in blue.
Can you please use it to orient the board?
Sure. So as you're looking at the drawing, kind of somewhat north-south on the left is Front Street with the river on your left. The other streets in the vicinity are planned south, just to the lower side of the blue highlight. That's Woodbine Street. The street most close to the north is a few properties away. That's Emerald. And then behind the property, there are a couple of lots that are situated that face in front on North 2nd.
Could you describe the access points?
Sure. There are currently 4 access points to the site. We have 2 driveways that come in off of North Front. There is a side driveway that comes in off of Woodbine Street, and there is another driveway that accesses from what is the rear of the property for us off of North 2nd.
Property in the RF district?
That is correct, yes.
And in your opinion, how is the property we're discussing tonight unique?
As you mentioned earlier, there are multiple parcels here. It is, especially relative to the need for zoning and signage sizing, it's a quite large property, particularly in the Riverfront District, but even within the city.
Does it also have a unique shape?
Yes, as you can see, it's not a simple rectangle. We've got a number of pieces that kind of jut out in different locations, particularly as you look to the rear towards North 2nd.
And then does it have improvements such as the columns that the fence attached to that have been around for a long time?
Absolutely, yes. We've done our best to preserve some of the historic elements on the site, and those two are particularly relevant here.
Can you describe to the board what improvements and renovations you've made to the property so far?
Sure. So since 2017, we have done substantial improvements on the second floor for the engineering business. A few years later, we completely overhauled the entire first floor and parts of the second floor to accommodate the wedding and events venue, which also included significant HVAC improvements, sprinkler system, fire pump. All of those have happened to date. Also, you might notice that on the exterior, we have done quite a bit of work on landscaping to clean up the front yard and the curb appeal.
Please turn the page. Before you is what we'll call Exhibit A2. What is it?
So this is a photograph as you're traveling south on North Front Street, just as you're kind of crossing the property line to our property with the mansion obviously on the left and the river on the right.
And the access point where the gentleman is walking, is that the main access or is that secondary access?
That's a secondary access.
Where's the main located?
So as you look further down into the picture beyond the car in the left lane, just past that is the main driveway into campus.
Are you proposing signage at any of the other access points or just at the main access point?
Just the main access point.
You mentioned that significant interior upgrades. What do you have planned now?
So we actually have some other interior upgrades underway, converting the third floor to residential guest rooms, which also includes an elevator tower and some associated HVAC and aesthetic improvements. In the exterior, we've got a number of items, predominantly hardscape landscape, which is a substantial amount of landscape improvements, a lot of which focus around the proposed sign. We're also doing some hardscape pavers to enhance the visitor experience, a little bit of paving work just to clean up some of the existing paving, which is could use a little bit of TLC. Some site lighting, which will also predominantly to help us with properly lighting the parking lot. Probably the big ticket items. A little bit of fence work that would, as Jeffrey mentioned, to kind of relocate the existing fence line to better coincide with the new sign location and proposed landscape.
Does the mansion currently have a sign?
We do not.
Why do you feel the sign is needed?
We absolutely need a way to identify our building as the King Mansion. We actually get this quite frequently, believe it or not. There is no number anywhere on the building. There is no signage to let people know that that's who we are. And quite honestly, depending which way they come from, they aren't exactly sure when to look. So we need this for visual identification for guests.
You turn the page. We'll call this Exhibit A3. What is it?
Another picture from North Front Street. This is actually at the main driveway, which is the closest to the building.
Is this where the sign will be located?
That's correct.
Could you kind of use the exhibit to describe to the board what you're proposing?
Sure. So as you would enter this main driveway, immediately on your right, you see kind of a triangular shaped piece of yard that's not currently within the fenced area of our what we call our great lawn. The idea here is to actually push that fence line out, put a sign there to bring it much more into view for folks coming south on North Front, and then include some landscaping to much more clearly define the entrance and develop a sense of entry and arrival upon getting to the mansion.
Thank you. We'll turn to the next page. Call this Exhibit A4. Describe it to the board.
Sure. So this is the more kind of detailed and site plan layout illustrating a number of things. I'll orient, again, everyone. So the way this sheet is oriented, across the bottom is North Front Street. To your right, you'll see Woodbine, which is on the south end of our campus. You'll see I'll kind of start in the front of the building and work my way left. So we do have a walkway in front of the building. We're looking to do some improved concrete walk. You see a couple of semicircle half moons that we're going to do with some stamped colored concrete, again, to better define the area where we actually do quite a bit of our wedding ceremonies. And then as you go to the left, this gets more to the sign, which is highlighted in red. You'll see the fence line has been pushed out a bit in that direction to make for a larger lawn area, because we do have some fairly substantial size wedding parties that do ceremonies. And then the landscaping that you saw in some previous drawings will also be in that area. All of the kind of cross-hatched areas you see, that's all of our existing paving. We'll likely just do some sort of, essentially like a seal coat to repaint everything and just polish it up a little bit. And then on the planned left side of the building, which would be the north end of the building, you'll see some additional concrete paving. We're actually removing existing asphalt in that area to install concrete walks with, again, better definition for guests, better arrival definition, and the last thing I'll note is you'll see 2 handicap parking spaces kind of at the dead center towards the top of the drawing. Those would have access to our handicap accessible ramp in the rear of the building, and also to our new elevator tower noted there, which is part of the currently ongoing construction.
K&W prepare this plan?
Yes, we did.
What's the triangle below and to the left of the red box where the sign is?
So that's showing a site triangle as required by ordinance to ensure that we don't have the sign placed in that location where it would impede sight lines.
And is the sign also outside of the right of way?
That is correct.
All right, turn the page. Call this Exhibit A5. What is it?
So this is elevation view detail showing the proposed signage and configuration in construction.
Could you just read briefly real quick what it says?
Sure. So there's a number of items here. So essentially just the makeup of the wall is limestone veneer over top likely of masonry block. The letters themselves would be some form of metal or aluminum that extrude or stand out away from the sign. You'll note also we are proposing some cast stone as a base, as well as the coping on the top. And then the 2 elements on each end, the columns, those are very specifically intended to match and mimic the other columns that exist historically on the site. In fact, we preserved a few of the pedestal tops from another part of campus that we're able to use here to make sure everything matches.
And is the proposed sign 16.242 square feet?
Correct.
Is it 4 feet 9 inches tall?
That is correct.
And how will it be lit?
So we're looking at 1, possibly 2 very small ground-based uplights, very subtle and soft. Certainly that, along with any other lighting that we propose here, would be compliant with any photometric requirements of the city.
Go to the next page, please. What is this? We'll call this Exhibit A6.
Sure. So this is actually a graphic illustration that our team prepared to show what it will look like upon completion of construction. Again, this is kind of a ground level view if you're in a vehicle heading south on North Front Street. Similarly, this is about that same kind of 230-foot distance from our main driveway. You'll see kind of a bit in the distance until the subsequent exhibit gets us closer, but you'll see the proposed signage, and you can tell, at least for me, the lettering is incredibly difficult to read at that distance, and that even does reflect the larger size that we're seeking here. And you'll also see some of the shrubbery landscaping is all showing what it should look like upon completion.
And then lastly, we'll turn to the next page. This is Exhibit A7. Please describe it to the board.
Sure, this is my favorite exhibit in the whole packet. So this one shows in much more detail. We're now on the sidewalk approaching the existing main access drive coming in off of North Front. You can see the sign itself with obviously the lettering. We've shown proportionally just, you know, a human figure just to represent approximate signs and proportionality, and really does show then also how that relates to the size and scale of the building in this location. Obviously, you see all of the proposed landscaping and the relocated fence that comes in along and lines up with the new sign as well.
So the 8 square feet is permitted, why is a larger sign required?
The sign height, oh, I'm sorry, for
8
the
square
size of the
foot
area.
size.
Again, visibility, just in the time for a driver to see the sign, react, and be able to recognize and determine to make that left turn into the main access drive, we feel like this is the appropriate size to actually make that happen safely based on, I think it's a 35-mile-an-hour posted speed on the north side of the front.
And is that analysis discussed in greater detail in the narrative?
It is, yes.
Does the ordinance differentiate between signage for a large building or a large property versus a small building or small property?
It does not.
What about sign height? What's allowed in the RF district?
4-foot maximum.
And why is taller necessary in this case?
Again, as we did a study on kind of evaluating the proportionality of the sign with the lettering related to the lettering height that we needed to make sure that it was visible, the height, the proportionality of that made sense at that height, and even probably more importantly is it matches much better with the fence height, so it aligns, creates the right sight lines, it doesn't look inordinately low and not proportional.
So as to help keep consistency with the pillars and posts?
Yes,
that are
exactly.
non-existing?
Yes.
Did you create the hardship that necessitates a taller and larger sign?
We did not.
And is it generally required due to the existing conditions on the property, the speed and type of traffic on the road, and the size of the property and the building?
Yes, it is.
In your opinion, are the requested variances the minimum necessary to afford relief?
Yes.
And is that because, as discussed in the narrative, they're consistent with what is needed to be safely readable?
Yes.
And lastly, have you had any conversations with neighbors?
Yes, so the property owner to our immediate north, Mr. Hartzler, I spoke with him. He was very supportive of the proposed sign, height, and lettering. As you see in this drawing, there's actually a church just south of us, the corner of Front and Woodbine. They recently sold the church. We had a great relationship with the previous owners. We have not had the good fortune of meeting the new owners. It's only been within maybe the last 2 months. Haven't had the opportunity to chat with them.
So I'd like to offer exhibits A1 through A7 for the record. Thank you. And then also for completeness of the record, I should have added earlier that I also received 2 phone calls from people that received letters that go out by the city. They had questions. They lived over on North Front Street. Were curious whether any signs were going to go up on North Front Street. I explained to them that they were not. The only sign was, North Second Street. I explained to them that no, they are not. They're only going in at this one access point, and they were fine with that. So with that, that concludes our presentation, and Mark or I are happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you.
Questions?
That's great.
Mark, I can't let you get away without asking a question. Yeah, okay. Talk about, I see there's a lot of landscaping and stuff, but have there been any input for stormwater management here since you're going to do some paving?
So we actually evaluated, we're reducing our impervious cover by I think about 1,000 square feet when all is said and done.
Okay, thank you. I gotta ask, I had 2 hats. We talk about the lettering, and I'm trying to picture coming down Front Street, and you're saying you're doing about 35 miles an hour. Um, Did you look at maybe something with reflective lettering or some lights that can basically show the lettering? Because you're only gonna be able to see it from coming north to south. Was there any
We did
consideration?
Sure, yeah, we did, and to be honest, as we looked at trying to preserve kind of that more traditional, classic look and feel of the mansion, we were concerned that anything of that nature is gonna feel a little too commercial, a little too, just not in common with the rest of the architecture and appearance.
I'm just considering the other buildings on Front Street, and they have lettering too, but it's lit lettering, okay? You have you have lights and stuff that basically shine into that. Have you talked to anybody from Historical Harrisburg, since this mansion seems to be, will be on an historical footprint?
We have an excellent relationship with the folks at Historic Harrisburg. We've actually hosted a number of events at the mansion and will continue to be strong supporters of that group. The sign specifically, we have not had conversation with David and his team,
Okay.
but they're very aware of our the improvements that we're undertaking currently, and we do have them out to see the building multiple times a year just through the fact of having events and having input. Yes, most certainly.
Okay. That's all the questions I have. Any, from the law department, any questions? No? Okay, so, let's go to the audience, to the left. Any questions about the project? Step up and speak. Middle? Okay, well, thank you. I'm gonna take a, quick recess, discuss this, and we'll be right back. Thank you for the brief inner timeout. Okay, we're back in session. I'd like to make a motion that the application of 2582 be approved with the conditions set by the planning bureau.
The planning commission resolution.
Yes.
Yeah.
Second.
Okay. Moved and properly second by myself and Mr. Hobbs. Questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Mark, I had to put something to account for Richard. He wouldn't take a pass. Yes, thank you. Ash, take care. Okay, so let's go on with our second application. And the second application is 2583, and I'm gonna turn this over to our solicitor to give the case study.
Okay, with the exhibit, so it's B1 is the application, B2 are the plans. There's 4 pages of those. B3 are the photos. There's 6 pages of photos. B4 is the applicant's notification letter and certified mailing receipts to required neighbors. B5 is a deed to the property establishing standing to pursue the zoning relief. B6, Planning Bureau case report. B7, City of Harrisburg Planning Commission resolution. B8 is the proof of publication, which was in Patriot News, June 2nd and June 9th, 2024. B9 is the letter sent from the planning director to the applicant notifying of the hearing tonight. And B10 is the hearing notice posted on the property. So we got B1 through B10.
Thank you. And I'll turn this over to Mr. Knight to give a breakdown from the planning organization.
Yes, so the application for case number 2583 is a variance and special exception application to establish a 3-unit multifamily dwelling on site. The zoning relief requests necessitated by this proposal are a special exception for the proposed use, a multifamily dwelling, a special exception for relief from one of the 4 required off-street parking requirements, parking spaces, and a variance for relief from the density criteria. The structure itself is large enough to that a conversion to 3 units is in conformance with the specific criteria in section 7309.2V of the zoning code. So that's something that the board maybe sees more often in other conversions of like row homes when it's too small, but this is a large enough structure to be converted to 3 units. The building, if any of the board members have seen it, is definitely in a deteriorated state. The applicants noted during the planning commission meeting that it's been 23 years or so, at least several decades since the property has been at least legally occupied. And that far predates the applicant's ownership of the property, which was in 2023, was purchased. So the existing condition was not due to the owners kind of letting it go. They're purchasing the property with the intention of reestablishing multiple units. While it's a little unclear what the history of the property was before its current vacancy, I think there were some references in the applicant's documentation to 3 units, and there's a 3-story fire escape on the rear of the property. The most we could find in the city's records were 2 units, but I don't know that our 2 units go back all the way to when maybe this was most actively and intensively utilized. So, we do feel that the proposal to establish 3 units on site is supported and is justified by the amount of investment that the applicants are going to need to undertake to correct a lot of the codes issues that I'm sure have occurred over the years, and just to kind of bring the property up not only structurally but cosmetically into a place that people will want to live. As far as the uses are concerned, the multifamily dwelling use, there's property right next door at 1851 Whitehall Street is a 6-unit multifamily dwelling. this board just 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, approved a conversion for a similar property just to the south across Regina Street at 1855 Regina Street for same thing, conversion. And that property had a similar history where you've got, it might have been multiple units at one point in the past, long period of vacancy has revoked that non-conforming aspect per the zoning code. And so now somebody is looking to purchase and reinvest and rehab a structure. And with respect to the off-street parking, as noted, there's a 3-unit accessory surface parking lot on the rear, accessible from Regina Street. And the property has a significant amount of frontage directly in front of the property, in which, the fourth space can be accommodated, which would be for guest parking anyway, but also kind of the local context. Again, the property just to the east at 1851 is a corner lot, and so it has a lot of street frontage kind of along that corner, which I'm sure is not, being utilized all the time, at least during the Planning Bureau's visits past the property. We have not seen it fully utilized. So with all that being said, we do feel that the condition of the property and the condition of the site do justify the 3 zoning relief requests from the applicant. And the Planning Commission has recommended that the Zoning Hearing Board approve the request with the following conditions. Granted zoning approval to move forward with the project as proposed. The applicant shall allow the Codes Bureau to perform a comprehensive inspection to identify all outstanding code violations and receive approval for all necessary city permits prior to receiving a certificate of occupancy. And again, with this step is just like a little bit more than what we might normally have in a proposal to convert, given the long period of vacancy, which again, not the applicant's fault. We have no idea what might have occurred either prior to that or during that time, and we want to make sure everything electrical plumbing is brought up to code. And then the applicant will coordinate with the Department of Public Works to ensure that the account billing is updated to reflect the proposed change in use. The Planning Commission recommended that the Zoning Hearing Board approve the request for the following reasons. A special exception request for the proposed use is warranted by the history of the property, the presence of other such converted apartment buildings in the immediate neighborhood, and the recent ZHB approval of a similar proposal at a nearby property with similar existing conditions, and that was 1855 Regina Street. The request for relief from off-street parking is warranted by the existing 3-space accessory parking lot at the rear of the property and the on-street parking available on the frontage of the property with Whitehall Street. Number 2, the project will result in the rehabilitation and restoration of a large residential property directly across from Reservoir Park, improving not only the condition of the block, but the overall appearance of the neighborhood at a highly visible site. And finally, as opposed to other such conversions in recent years, which have proposed the establishment of 1-bedroom or studio units, the current project will create 3 2-bedroom units, which will add to the multi-bedroom inventory, which is in high demand in the city.
Thank you very much. Okay, so the applicants need to have your name, your address, but before we do that, let's raise your hand. I'd like to swear you in. Okay, so swear testimony and statements you're going to make in support of this application are true. Well, thank you. And
Zahid Alizadeh, 2858 Stillwell
Speak up.
Stillwell
Can't you hear?
Avenue.
speak up.
Go ahead.
Pick up.
Yeah.
Zahid Alizadeh, 2858 Stillwell Avenue, apartment 4I, Brooklyn, New York.
Christopher Torres, 2155 Jefferson, Harrisburg, PA, zip code 17110.
So tell us about your project, please.
Yes, we purchased this building in September of 2023, and this building has been abandoned for several decades. And yeah, we are looking to renovate this unit and bring it back to life as our proposal. As we propose, it's going to be 3 units, 2 bedrooms on each floor, and then the three parking spaces in the back. We're basically not adding anything to the outside of the property. We will be improving the landscape, and then yeah, we will do all renovations. Everything is brand new basically. Yeah, we will do the full demolition and then the full renovation. Basically everything will be brand new. All the floor plans, everything basically. Yeah.
I'm here just to make it happen, so.
Okay. Cool, thank you.
Yeah, if you have any questions about
great.
this property, let me know.
Mr. Hobbs? Um, I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
So you currently own the property?
Yes.
correct? Do you have a floor plan of what the property is gonna look like, before and after? The
we-
internal piece.
Yeah, we do have a floor plan, what's going to look after. Yeah.
Okay, can you make sure that,
Yes, it is presented.
I believe that was presented with the case documentation. It's a fairly simple floor plan, and I think it's a proposed floor plan, so I don't know if it reflects existing conditions and therefore maybe how much actual work needs to happen. But they did submit a sketch floor plan.
okay, thank you. And I did see a note in planning commission, code violations that exist. Okay, they'll be,
Yeah, I mean, there was a
They're
long,
aware- they're
dur-
aware of it.
yeah, and during the decades of vacancy, there were a number of condemnation orders issued for like high grass and weeds, things of that nature, trash piling up. So codes has kind of had this on their radar for a little while, and I'm sure they'll be happy to, have this property cleaned up and occupied.
that's all I have, thank you. From the audience to my right, any questions? Audience in the center, any questions? City Law Department, any questions? Okay, so, it's recess time again, we're not going out for just something to drink. I need to take a quick recess, and we'll be back. Thank you. so, we'll make the motion for the project.
I'll make a motion. The second.
Okay, so we make a motion, okay, so make a motion for the approval of this project with conditions set forth by the planning commission. Okay. Need a second?
Second.
Okay, so moved and properly second. Questions? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Well, thank you very much for showing us. Thank you. Now, it's ready. Okay, and for our next case. Applicants. Okay, so, Mr. Connors, would you read the application into the record, please?
Okay, so it's application 2584, 1103 South Front Street. And the board exhibits or application is B1 is the application, which includes narrative, photographs, plans. B2 are applicants' notification letters and certified mail receipts to required neighbors. B3, agreement of sale establishing standing to pursue zoning relief. B4 is the Planning Bureau case report. B5, City of Harrisburg Planning Commission resolution. B6 is a proof of publication in the Patriot News, June 2nd and June 9th. For this application. B7 is the letter sent from the planning director to the applicant notifying applicant of the hearing, and B8 is the hearing notice posted on the property. So that's it, B1 through B8.
Well, thank you. Mr. Knight, can you give a synopsis and break down the project?
Sure. So the application for case number 2584 is a proposal for a use not specifically prohibited. So this proposal is similar to the proposal that was heard by the board several years ago for the property just to the south at 1105 South Front Street, Veterans Grove, or the VOPA site. And so this is similar. In that case, we said a use not specifically prohibited. And I think at the time, the zoning hearing board had eventually determined that it was a supportive housing facility. This one's a little bit different, so we did make that recommendation in discussions with the applicants for use not specifically prohibited with that in mind, because this is a larger facility. That was just 15 tiny homes, which were not even like full units, I think. This is a much larger facility that has not only an apartment building on site, where each unit within the apartment building is a fully furnished unit, but we'll have 20 individual standalone comfort homes on the property, and then the first floor of the apartment building or mixed-use building will provide like services and programming for residents. So it is kind of an amalgam of, you know, supportive housing, multifamily dwelling, detached housing, maybe community center. And so given all that, we felt it was right to go forward with it as a use not specifically prohibited in the zoning code. As I did note in the case report, a multifamily dwelling use, if that's what the board would choose, would be a special exception too. So it's not like we chose a less intensive path for this process. So in addition to that special exception for the use not specifically prohibited, a zoning approval was required for structures that are less than the minimum height requirement, which is 36 feet per the zoning code. The comfort homes themselves, I believe, are about 15 feet tall. So those aspects of the site will require the variance for relief from that dimensional criteria. The mixed-use building will not. So that is fully in conformance, and to the Planning Bureau's knowledge, at least from the conceptual plans that we've seen and discussions we've had with the applicants, all of the other aspects of the property are intended to be in conformance. Things like setbacks, pervious surface coverage, providing landscape screening, things of that nature. And the applicants will have the required amount of parking on site to address these, even though, as they've noted in their testimony, the majority of the residents will not have vehicles there. Again, this is intended to address homelessness for critical population here in the city of homeless veterans. So, I think the expectation is that most of them will be on site most of the time, or be maybe using the Greenbelt through the property to access the rest of the city services. I think outside of the proposed use and the proposed development on site, which the city is fully in support of, as they proposed, I think the only really outstanding issue is the Greenbelt, and this is an issue we brought up at the prior review of the VOPA facility, and something we've been in discussions with both the applicants as well as representatives from the Capital Area Greenbelt Association. As we understand it, there are negotiations ongoing between between CAGA and between the applicants and property owners, and it's not quite as straightforward as just the applicants and CAGA. There are some other individuals involved as well, but at the end of the day, we just want to ensure that the critical link of the Greenbelt is maintained between the bridge over the railroad tracks, which is the only bridge across the south of 83, and the other bridge being Sycamore Street, which is currently functioning as a detour for the Greenbelt, which the Planning Bureau feels is really wholly insufficient and really unsafe for a long-term or permanent detour for the belt. And so this particular property just happens to sit right between the Dauphin County General Authority property to the north, where the Greenbelt runs along the riverfront portion of that property, and this bridge. And so our real primary concern with respect to the project is making sure that connection remains uninterrupted into the future, and not just for continuity's sake or even for the general public, but for residents of both this project, the VOPA facility, and an eventual pending transitional housing project that will be proposed for the parcel that will be created when they go through the subdivision and land development plan process. So it's really kind of for the benefit of all parties involved. That all being said, the Planning Commission has recommended that the Zoning Hearing Board approve the request for the following with the following conditions. If granted approval to move forward with the project as proposed, the applicant shall submit a subdivision and land development plan for approval from the Planning Commission and City Council. While the applicant notes that the comfort homes will be capable of being ADA compliant, the Planning Bureau recommends they be constructed to visible standards at a minimum, with allowances for full conversion to ADA accessibility in the future. And I believe the applicants have concurred that that was their intent. The language in the application was a little unclear, and that's just why we wanted to make sure that point was included in as a condition of approval. The third one is where there was some discussion at the Planning Commission meeting and some disagreement between the applicants and the planning commissioners. It says the applicant shall coordinate with the Capital Area Greenbelt Association regarding their intention of the Greenbelt across the property. In the original Planning Bureau case report, it said the applicant should continue coordination with the Capital Area Greenbelt Authority, and so that language was the differentiation. This will retain a recreational amenity for the community at large, will provide a walking, biking route for residents to connect to the surrounding community and the city overall. As the applicant notes, many will not own vehicles, and will maintain an ecological buffer along the river. Based on the proposed site design, the Planning Bureau would recommend that the applicant incorporate a portion of the Greenbelt across the southern boundary of the property, connecting the existing bridge of the railroad tracks to the emergency access road along the western boundary of the property. 4, the Planning Bureau recommends the applicant install the required bicycle parking in the ghost parking spaces fronting the mixed-use building, which you might have seen on the site plans, or near the main entrance, and be sheltered if possible. Residents of the comfort homes can store their bikes in their units, and I think the applicants indicated that during the Planning Commission meeting that they did not want to create more additional impervious surface for the bike parking area. So I'm not sure if that means their intent is to have a secured indoor bike facility for any residents of that building, but it sounds as though they're going to be providing the parking, and it's just a matter of design perhaps or location. And then finally, the Planning Bureau recommends that the applicant coordinate with the city arborist regarding required landscaping and trees on site, and consider installing native plants and pollinator plants in landscaped areas throughout the site generally, and more specifically around the proposed stormwater detention basins. And the applicants were fully supportive of that condition at the Planning Commission meeting. The Planning Commission recommends that the zoning hearing board approve the request for the following reasons. The proposed project will meet a critical need, housing for homeless individuals, and will specifically target a group, veterans, who are disproportionately represented in the homeless population. Will provide quality, accessible units that improve their standard of living, and will introduce a housing approach that may be a template for future projects. The project represents a continuation of recent development projects in this area, intended to provide accommodations and services for those experiencing homelessness. And finally, if the recommended conditions of approval are adopted, the proposed project will result in improvements to the site that will provide benefits to the greater public welfare, including formalized access for greenbelt users, improved trail conditions, and maintenance of existing natural and ecological buffers.
Thank you. And the applicants, again, state your name, your address, but first we need to swear you in. So can you raise your right hand, please? Testimony, okay, ready? Testimony you're about to deliver will be the truth and whole truth?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you very much. Okay, so we'll start with.
Thank you. My name is Bruce Grossman, Caldwell and Kearns. I'm counsel for the project, 3631 North Front Street, Harrisburg, PA.
Luis Menendez, Director of Construction for the Homeless Veterans Program, 70 Oakwood Avenue, Upper Montclair, New Jersey, 07043.
Thank you.
I'm Justin Holcomb. I'm with the Tuttle to Towers Foundation. I reside at 5488 Clonmel Court, Alexandria, Virginia, 22315. Thank you.
Thank you. So, let's start. Tell us about your project, please.
Well, thank you. The purpose of the project, as you see from an artist's conception, is to build a community for up to 80 homeless veterans on land next to the Riverside Office Center where the PennDOT facilities are located. Mr. Holcomb is going to briefly describe to you the foundation and its work with these types of projects.
Take this mic off so I can get to it, sorry. Just want to thank the board. Thank you, Chairman, for hearing us out tonight. This is really excited to be back in the city of Harrisburg. Our foundation started September 11th, 2001. Most everyone in this room knows where we were that day. I wanted to give you a perspective of the reason the foundation started. It was because of firefighter Stephen Siller. I know the chairman, you have a perspective of what Manhattan was like that day, but from his perspective, he had just finished a night shift the night before as a New York City firefighter. He was on his way to Long Island to play golf with his brothers. The first plane hits the first tower as Stephen is on the other side of the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel. He gets a call on the radio. He parks his truck outside the tunnel. The tunnel gate has already been closed for security reasons. Stephen straps on 60 pounds of gear on his back and runs through the tunnel back to the towers, hence the name Tunnel to Towers, and Stephen's what I'm wearing tonight. Stephen would later die that day in the South Tower, saving lives. His older brother, Frank Siller, our founder, that night, their entire family sat together and said, what do we do about this? Thousands of orphans have been made today. Thousands of families have been affected. They start the foundation. For the past 20 years, we've been building homes for catastrophically injured veterans, Gold Star families, fallen first responders, thousands throughout the country, over a dozen in the Commonwealth here. And I believe we've helped over 100 families in the Commonwealth to date through our programs. About 2 years ago, the foundation decided to start tackling the issue of homeless veterans in our country. There's around 33,000. This brings us here today. We used a two-pronged approach to tackle this problem. We're building infrastructure like this throughout the country,
We're operational. We have a building that's been operating since last year in Houston. We broke ground in Atlanta about 3 weeks ago. This past Saturday, I was in the greater Tampa area breaking ground on a project just like this. And besides the infrastructure that you see here, which is the apartment building surrounded by the comfort homes, the entire first floor, which you'll see later, is our supportive services. So as a foundation, we're not just showing up and building the infrastructure and then leaving. The entire first floor will be supportive services, both nationally and locally, to help support the veterans in the area. This problem is something that we don't want to own. We want to work with the city to make this problem go away. This project would inevitably free up several hundred beds throughout the Harrisburg area, which I know there's already a shortage of. You know, at the end of the day, at some point in time, each person who ends up living here raised their right hand and pledged to serve this country and ultimately up into give up their life. They were defending our homes, your homes, our homes, my home on our behalf, and we didn't even know they were doing it. We owe them at least this much, and that's where our foundation comes in. We're 100% privately funded. We're not asking the city or the Commonwealth for $1. And at the end of the day, it's about changing these people's lives, making the city better, and being a great partner with you guys. And I just want to thank you. I'll turn it back over to Bruce. We can answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Justin. So in order to do this project, we requested two approvals. The first is, as Mr. Knight explained, we're not sure exactly which use you would like to define it as. The Veterans Outreach Project was defined as supportive housing, but technically was not one of the uses otherwise specified in the code for the Riverfront District. And so you approved a special exception for their use, and we're requesting a similar special exception. That exception is not contrary to any of the prohibitions in the code, and is not adjacent to parcels zoned as open space recreation, and is not in an historical district. I'd now like to ask Mr. Menendez a bunch of questions to demonstrate that we qualify for this special exception. Would you please explain pedestrian and vehicle access to the property in and out?
Yes.
I'm going to switch to the original sketch plan that was submitted to you.
So our proposed access to the site is hinged on the current access road that exists across the property that provides access to the VOPA site, as well as the intermediate property between us. This property exists all the way out to what we call Front Street, all the way out to Sycamore, which is a private right-of-way, and provides access for us on a limited basis. Our tenants, which by majority do not have vehicles, and access to the site would be through that road for limited deliveries, access for service personnel, and access for volunteers who work at our facilities.
Would you please explain what the character of the surrounding areas, the neighborhoods is?
There are no residential there is no residential neighborhood in the area. It's open space. We have the river on one side of our property and the railroad on the other side. In addition, we've got a vacant piece of property on one side and another property, which is the PennDOT property, neither one which we control.
Would you briefly describe the off-street parking arrangements for the property?
So we've looked at it in many different ways. We want to be cognizant of the requirements that we need to comply with. We've been working with staff to determine what would be the best mix of parking. We've tried to maximize it through our civil engineering analysis and have come up with the concept of this ghost parking to increase the number of parking that we can. Not preferred, because we're building parking capacity that is not really necessary, and we're creating paved areas that are really impervious and do not help the overall drainage of the project.
Would you describe the open space and the setbacks of the property, please?
As far as the open space and setbacks, we've looked at those and we comply with whatever requirements we need to comply with.
Would you describe if there's going to be any buffering, plantings, screening plantings, fences, things like that?
There will be. There is a fence that is planned around the entire facility, or village, I should say. We don't call them facilities, we call them villages. The natural topography, we're looking right now to balance it and try to reuse the number of some of the buffering trees that are there. Our intent is to maintain a level of security and privacy, which we believe is important for our village, to maintain that sense of ownership and peace that we believe is important for rehabilitation. So we will be working with the arborist to develop a plan, landscape plan and mitigation plan of the existing trees. We can't promise that all the trees will remain. There will be some that will be affected, but we do plan on a comprehensive landscape plan as well as a color beautification plan that comes along with our landscaping around the different buildings and along the entrance and other parts of the site with the colors that have become synonymous with our program.
Will the project create any significant public safety hazard, toxic substances, explosives, fires?
None other than your occasional barbecue that may happen, but again, that is controlled. We do not condone open flames. We do not have any of that. We don't have any toxic materials. We have no gases or anything that we would store in this facility. So for all intents and purposes, it's an inert site. It has anything that we would use. If anything was require a permit, we would certainly have to come before the county for any kind of permit, or the city.
Would you please discuss the anticipated traffic impact of this project?
We believe it's limited, again, because of the low occupancy ownership of vehicles and the quantity of staff that comes in and out on a daily basis. We've come to be in an area of roughly between 15 and 20. So it's something that is manageable with the existing parking that we're planning. As far as access to the roads, like I said, it would be through the private right-of-way that we've been granted through the PennDOT property.
Will the project generate any particular odors, any noxious odors?
Not that we're aware of. I mean, we are not producing anything ourselves. We do no manufacturing. We do no other sort of events or anything on that property that would generate any kind of odors.
Is any late night or early morning hours of operation expected other than a 24/7 residential community?
We do have 24/7 staff on site, as well as now there is a curfew. I mean, there are times where tenants will eventually have to retire to their units. They still are able to stay within their facility, but we do not encourage any outside activity beyond a certain time. And we would obviously have to comply with the ordinances of Harrisburg.
Is any outdoor lighting plan that would affect nearby residential areas?
As I said before, there are no residential areas other than our friends on VOPA. We do have a buffer between them, but as part of our development plan, we do have internal lighting for the roadway, sidewalks. It's an active site. We do encourage the veterans to use the site. They do have the services within the building, so there is interaction between the main building and the perimeter village. So the lighting would have to be something that is conducive to that environment, and we will go through an extensive photometric analysis to make sure that not only that the streets are properly lit, but the sidewalks are safe, that they can walk through.
Has any area been designated for loading area and a refuse area?
We have identified an area on the north side of the building to locate our refuse location. We do have access to the end of the building for any type of delivery, but that's all still under study, and we will eventually come to a conclusion on our final site plan.
Are there any wetlands on T2T's property?
Not that we're building on. I mean, there is the river on the edge. There is a swale on the railroad side. Nothing to say that they are wetlands as defined, but any type of mitigation during construction, any kind of soil erosion or sedimentation control would have to be in effect. After construction, obviously, all the disturbed area would have to be stabilized, and the site would perform as designed.
How will you connect to utilities on the property?
Utilities are existing as we know it. There's a force main along the emergency access road. There is water down the emergency access road, and there's an existing or a new electric line that's been extended following the access road to feed our VOPA neighbors. So we would be tying into that electric. We've made discussions with or started discussions with the electric company within ourselves as far as the electrical engineer to determine what that load is and how to begin the conversation with the utility companies to make those connections. Sanitary, we've worked on the elevations of our new buildings to make sure that we're able to connect to the existing infrastructure that's in place. Same with water, which is a little bit more of an easier lift, but there is capacity there not only to feed the main building, but the individual homes.
Will there be any signage on the property?
We do have a prototype signage package, as many companies have. We do have something that we would like to place on the building. We do have an entrance monument sign to identify the entrance to the property with the address. We also have a monument that which commemorates those folks that have either fallen, and we've helped in the state of Pennsylvania. And we do this on all our sites, which is a place of reflection. We provide benches. We provide a landscaped area where you can come and reflect on the loss of a loved one or wherever you may be. And at that point in time, you're able to come and spend some quality time there.
If there is any public signage, will it comply with applicable requirements?
As far as public sign, of course, we would have to comply with the local ordinance. If there are some areas where we can find some common ground, if we need to look at variance, we would certainly come again and ask for permission or at least consideration of what we may be proposing.
Will any buildings be demolished for the project?
There are no standing buildings other than remnants of existing buildings. So there are some foundations, there are some walls, some we may use, some we may take out. Some of the existing foundations will definitely have to come out. But there are no vertical structures to think of that we have to remove.
Would you please explain the purpose of the Comfort Home?
So the Comfort Home is something that's unique, something that we're very proud of. We've spent quite a bit of time developing a prototype that is specifically larger than a tiny home, larger than what's considered a micro home. So we call them Comfort Homes. They're approximately 14 foot wide by 35 foot long. So we have found that that footprint gives us the opportunity to develop a workable living room, center kitchen area with a bathroom, and a bedroom, all being ADA compliant. And we've spoken about the visitability capabilities of the building. This is something that was part of our analysis that we found that many of the veterans' questions was, what happens to my friend? What happens to my buddy if he comes to my house? How does I might be able to get in, because not every veteran is physically challenged. Many are, and so but are able to use steps. They're able to use ramps. So all our homes are fitted out with a ramp, whether you need it or not. And you may not need it today, you may need it in the future, or a future tenant may need it. So we designed them with the ramp. We designed them all ADA accessible, And from a visitor's perspective, if they have somebody that can come over, the house will accommodate the visitor as well.
Why were the comfort homes designed for one story only?
We design, there are many factors that go into this. It's for a single living. They're not for multiple occupants. We size it so that one individual could have a visitor, but two people cannot live in this, and they could, but it would be rather tight and not conducive for that. So the living was for an individual that can live on a ground floor, easily accessible to the outside. Compliant, all our casework is ADA compliant. If somebody needs the additional need to approach the cabinets, it's designed so that the cabinet can be removed and the actual panel put in place so that they can access the unit. One story, because once again, there are folks that are physically challenged. A second story would create a hardship on, or an economic burden on our model, having to build a vertical transportation system, meaning either an elevator or some sort of a chairlift to go from the ground floor to the second floor. In this particular scenario, we have 20 units. That means that there are 20 elevators or 20 chairlifts that would have to go in place. So from our model and our economic approach to duplicating this model, it makes sense to be on a single level. Now, the proportions of the house is where it leads us to the height, where a house, a single floor house that's too high may not look proper. And the spaces internally, and we went through the volume study of the inside of the space to create the two end units with a vaulted ceiling that gives you the sense of height without the house being much higher than what it is. Transportation issues go into our model to determine if it can be transported, especially if we're dealing with the Northeast. We're dealing with infrastructure that's rather old. Bridges are lower. And so in order to transport these houses, we have to maintain a certain height restriction.
Would you have considered this project if you had to construct a 36-foot high building or higher?
Not for the homes. The homes would not be part of this project if it's something that we would have to build. We would not be pre-manufacturing. It would be cost prohibitive to build a multi-story building and then bring it to the site. It just doubles and sometimes triples the amount of transportation costs because of the number of modules that it would take to build a multi-story building.
What physical characteristics of the property are conducive to this project?
And the site is very attractive in the sense that it is, for the same reason that our friends at VOPA said, this is a site for us. It's serene, it's set aside, it's got a beautiful, it's got a view of the river, it's secluded. We're able to control access through and around our property, and that's important to us, not only for security, but being able to live your life in a level of security that you otherwise would not have been experiencing for whatever time you have spent outside, either living on the street or jumping from home to home. There's a certain sense of security that doesn't exist. It takes time to build, and we believe that this environment, with creating that solitude, is something that's important for the veteran to get a start to rehabilitation and be able to either reintegrate back into society, buy their own home. You can stay here as long as you like. Our preference is if you're living in our multi-story building, that you are a younger veteran, you're able to get yourself on your feet and you're able to reintegrate back into society. The home, on the other hand, is something that we afford the older veteran, the 55 and over veteran. Some of these veterans dating back to the Vietnam War are veterans that may not be reintegrating back into society anytime soon. You may be a candidate for this particular house, and you can stay here for the rest of your life. So these are important in certain aspects of our overall program, but there are certain responsibilities that they are required to adhere to. One of them is we have no tolerance for getting into trouble. That's something that it's not part of our program. We have a zero tolerance on drug use, alcohol use, and any environment that may potentially create that outside our village is something that is of tremendous concern for us.
I would also point out some of the factors that Mr. Knight noted in his report that I would suggest the board can consider, including the fact that this site remained undeveloped for many, many years. It was undesirable. It was a vacant industrial land, formerly steel mill, and access to this property was not created until Veterans Outreach created that access road across the eastern border. And finally, that this variance really is in furtherance of the proposed use of the property that is accommodating less than able people in accessible facilities. I don't have anything further to say. If there are any questions, we'd be glad to answer them.
Anybody from, give me away in the audience is supporting you? Roger?
Hi, thanks for the time. I'm John Hickey. I am a board member at Veterans Outreach of Pennsylvania. My address is 3901 Pam A. Drive, Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania, 17050. We did want to come express support for our sort of brothers in arms here in terms of what is being proposed. Veterans Outreach, I can tell you, I've been on the board for a couple years. The dream has, if you weren't able to get down and see the grand opening, the dream has been realized. There are currently 4, and we're supposed to get a 5th resident today. So we have taken people from the streets of Harrisburg, and they're currently living in our therapeutic community. That community is going to be filled forever, basically, with very fragile individuals, many of whom are suffering from PTSD and other physical disabilities brought on by their service. And that, you know, we will eventually have 15 folks. Our program is a therapeutic model, so it is not intended, unlike Tunnel to Towers, it is not intended to be transitional or even permanent long-term. It is to get people well enough to move to phase 2. It was just God's grace, I don't know what we would call it, but it was just, you know, good fortune that we found out about Tunnel to Towers and were able to talk to them about coming here and provide that phase 2 of when someone is ready to leave Veterans Outreach and potentially go, you know, a couple hundred yards north and go into transitional or even more permanent housing, as Luis said, about for people that are over 55 and may not be, you know, it may not be an option to go back into the workforce or reintegrate into a more day-to-day societal living. So we just, like I said, are just here to support them and say what a great, and you know, ask for that you approve their request.
It's a partnership. I mean, we are creating the, like John said, this is something for them, it's therapeutic. We're gonna get to a point where then we can accept them in our permanent housing facility. And hopefully they can go on from there as they maintain their progress to move on and back into society.
Thank you. I'm Douglas Hill, and I'm the president of the Capital Area Greenbelt Association. I'm a resident at 709 Green Street in Harrisburg. Excuse me. And with your permission, we have a sketch that we'd like to furnish you relative to the issue of placement, relocation of the Greenbelt in relationship to this project.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to ask in what capacity Mr. Hill is testifying. He is not an abutting property owner. So I'm going to object to his testimony as not having standing. I certainly want the board to hear from him, but for the record, Mr. O'Connor.
First, he would have to be sworn in, but also you're here on behalf of an organization.
That's correct.
Correct? Okay,
happy
that
to-
would also, I mean, is impacted by this?
There's no question.
Okay. Yep.
But if you would rather me speak at a separate time, that's fine.
No, this is fine.
Okay.
Just be sworn in. That's what I mean.
Testimony you're about to give is true, nothing but the truth?
It is.
Thank you.
Thank
Continue.
you.
I apologize.
Yeah,
No,
thank
that's
you,
fine.
and I appreciate the opportunity to appear. So the Capital Area Greenbelt Association is a nonprofit. We are entirely volunteer-run. We exist to maintain, promote, and grow the Greenbelt as a recreational use and active transportation route and as an ecological amenity for the city. I'm appearing here tonight because the proposed development is squarely on the historic route of the Capital Area Greenbelt. The Greenbelt also passed through part of what became developed as VOPA. When that was in front of you back in 2021, we relinquished all right to use there, recognizing the specific need and the configuration of that property. And the representation was made that we would then be able to have the opportunity to work out an alternate route for the trail in the balance of the remaining property. Because this is the property that's immediately adjacent to the Dauphin County General Authority and is where the trail enters this particular lands, we felt it particularly important to be here tonight to present these comments. To be clear though, at the outset, I need to be very clear that we did support VOPA. We are so glad to see that they've opened and the success they're having so far. And we do support this project. We recognize the very distinct needs that we have in our community. And in fact, for that matter, by extension, we support what we understand will be a third different take on serving this population that's going to be proposed for the intervening property. We recognize that need, and we don't want anything that we say tonight to needlessly delay or cause any problems for this proposal to proceed. To give you a little bit of background on this particular parcel, so the Greenbelt has been in existence for about 100 years. The intent was to circle the city, but it wasn't quite able to do that, and one of the particular problem areas was here in South Harrisburg. When the Phoenix Iron and Steel Corporation, I guess it was, closed in 1961 and then began demolishing the facilities, that created an opportunity for the path to go through there. And with the permission of the landowners at the time, we were allowed to come in and develop the trail. We had, on an all-volunteer basis, people that went through with equipment that we purchased with grants and other monies. We moved better than 50,000 cubic yards of debris. We did grading, leveling, and we did construction of the trails, and they've been in use for the 30 years since we began that back in the mid-1990s. Excuse me. I will, as I'm saying this, make acknowledgement or emphasize the point that we had a written permission to use the property. We did not have a license or an easement or a right-of-way. And so because of that, both the city's comprehensive plan and your own zoning ordinance call for completion of the trail, in other words, resolving those linkages so that we have a permanent trail through there and in a couple of other places where there are private properties. I'll also mention, if it's helpful, that we do not own any part of the trail. Most of the trail is actually owned by the municipalities, and in addition to Harrisburg, it touches Pembroke, Paxton, Swatara, and Susquehanna townships. And where it crosses private lands, what we've arranged are easements or license agreements that are then recorded in the name of the host municipality. And that's done for a couple different reasons, most notably because that makes them a part of the recreational transportation structure of those municipalities. It also opens them to patrol and supervision by the safety forces of the respective municipalities, and it makes them eligible for state and federal grants, and then also transfers liability under the Tort Claims Act to the municipality for the users of the trail. I mentioned that we are part of the comprehensive plan and zoning plan. We are also part of the work that Tri-County is doing on the Harrisburg Active Transportation System, and in fact, we're a key to that, given the length of the trail, close to 20 miles, as well as another 6 miles or so of spur trails. And we are also proud to say that we are part of the National 9/11 Trail. And if you're not familiar with that, that is a cycle trail that's part roadway, part secured trails, but it goes from Shanksville up to New York City, down to Arlington, and back in a large triangular configuration with side routes out to Gettysburg and to the city of Pittsburgh. And I think there's more as well. Here in Harrisburg, because of some configuration of the highway issues up around Dauphin, they come down Route 15, they cross the Harvey Taylor Bridge, and then they're on the trail from the Harvey Taylor Bridge all the way down through this specific site to Cameron Street. And then at Cameron Street, they go down through Steelton and connect to the Enola High Grade Trail and on out from there. We have been engaged with discussions with representatives of T2T, and we think that has been going well. We've reviewed a number of alternatives with them, and what we're presenting to you tonight, it does not represent any level of agreement. It's just one of the alternatives we've discussed, but this is our preferred alternative for several reasons. And as you will see, what we did, we took the sketch plan that they furnished to you, and I think that's in Exhibit B1, and we sketched on there the, in red is where the trail currently runs or historically has run, and then we sketched in green the proposed alternative. You see the red where it runs diagonally through the property. Obviously, there's no way that could be supported based on their use, nor would we suggest that it be. And instead, we continue the trail on down the emergency access road, which is also the utilities, and then propose crossing their property at the southern boundary where it abuts the land that's yet to be developed, and then connects back up where the trail crossed over up at the upper end. We believe that the trail, given that the paved width would be optimally about 12 feet, would fit conveniently within the side yard setback. The sketch plan that was provided for you, the only thing literally that would be affected, the sketch plan shows the 6-foot fence running through that southern side yard. To accommodate the trail, that would have to be moved into the property, but it still is at a respectable distance from any of the comfort homes that run along that particular part of the property. I'll mention too that we did look at other alternatives. In our discussions, they suggested to us that instead of crossing at the southern boundary, we cross at the northern boundary, and up there staying on the lands of the Dauphin County General Authority, and then pick up on the far side running along the new access road that has gone in for VOPA, and then connecting at the same place that you see going up to the railroad bridge. We did explore that with the Dauphin County General Authority. They presented the notion to their board, and we were soundly rejected. They said we are welcome to maintain the piece that we have across their property by license agreement that runs along the river and actually connects to the emergency access route. But to accommodate the trail along their southern boundary on their lands would require us to grade 2 300-foot long slopes in order to achieve, because of the elevations, to achieve handicap usability, and it would ultimately require their loss of about 43 spaces in their employee lot. And so on that basis, they said it simply wouldn't be acceptable, it wouldn't be doable. And so that's when we returned to this discussion. The only other alternative that had been placed on the table was to maintain the route that we're currently using for a detour, which staff mentioned to you previously, and that's going out Sycamore Street. Right now the detour goes down Cameron. There was a discussion of moving it to a couple parcels that are on this side of the railroad overpass, if you're familiar with that. But as the city intimated in their opening comments, there are some design issues both with the vertical curve of the bridge and the placement of the supports for the railroad that create significant problems with sight distances, and so would render it unsafe for both pedestrian and cycle traffic. And so that's why we are looking at this particular route. As to benefits, It's been discussed that it would provide pedestrian and active transportation access to the city for the T2T residents. It also, we know from trail use, can provide some therapeutic benefit as well. In addition to them being on property, it gives them access to the more extended route of the trail. I also point out that this would afford an opportunity to make a connection, a pedestrian connection to the adjoining property and then the full way down to Veterans Grove, on the emergency access road. Right now, that is crushed stone rolled, and it aligns with where the emergency egress is on the VOPA property, and we think that would give good pedestrian access the whole way down. I'll also mention that one of the conditions you placed and was included in the subdivision plan for VOPA was that they were to have a publicly accessible viewpoint on the northwest corner of their property. They have installed the pad for that, but they do not have as yet a means to provide access, and they represented to us that that's something they would have to negotiate at least with the adjacent property owner. And so by allowing the access this way on the emergency access road, I think would fulfill that requirement as well. And then the last thing I'll reemphasize too is that because this is part of the National 9/11 Trail, provide a wonderful opportunity to synthesize and recognize both the veterans who have served as well as the 9/11 Trail itself. We think there would be a great opportunity to, for example, place a marker in that area for those who use the trail so that they would understand the important work that T2T is providing as well as VOPA and the memory that we're invoking by the use of the 9/11 Trail. Last thing I want to comment on is safety. And you've heard it expressed, although not in as much detail as we've had in our discussions, that there is importance in segregating the population from any potential for access to drugs, alcohol, and so on. The property, as sketched, does have a 6-foot fence surrounding it. A planting buffer is proposed as well. We would be happy to work with them to improve that in any additional way that might be suitable. But I do want to emphasize that this type of recreation and active transportation route is demonstrably, and I do mean by empirical study, is demonstrably shown to encourage safety and to discourage bad actors. In fact, I was just on a call this morning with the National Rails to Trails Association, and that was one of the topics of discussion, that universally it improves property values, it improves the nature and character of the use nearby. I'll also mention, and I may be misstating here because I'm not closely allied with T2T, but a couple of the projects they've mentioned, Atlanta and Houston, I believe, are conversions of existing hotel properties. And those are obviously in commercial settings and so have typical heavy public access in immediate proximity. And so I think that this doesn't pose any difficulty that cannot be overcome. And last, relative to this point, is that the other route that had been proposed was along the northern and eastern boundaries, and so essentially covers the same touch points, same length of proximity as to going along the west and the south. So it's materially no different going this route than going the other one that they had suggested to us. Last point is that even though we are a nonprofit, we are non-staffed, we do have significant capacity for fundraising. We already have into 6 figures that we believe are committed to helping develop the relocation for the trail in this area, and we have other applications pending as well. So with that, I will simply conclude by saying that we've made a comparable presentation with the Planning Commission. We agree with the recommendation that they made to you, and we support moving the proposal along.
Thank you.
Thank you.
very
Mr.
much.
Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I would like to note for the record that, first of all, 3 days after the Planning Commission hearing, the Executive Vice President of the foundation, Mr. Hill, and a representative of the National Greenbelt Trail were already coordinating and talking, number one. Number two, I would point out that any requirement that the foundation give use of its land to the Greenbelt would constitute an uncompensated and therefore unconstitutional taking of private property.
Just briefly, I will affirm that we did have the conversation with their national, and we do intend to continue this as a good faith negotiation. We are not asking for a taking.
I got it. First of all, before we get to that, is there anybody else, anybody else in the audience that hasn't spoken that wants to speak on this? Okay, then you can. Yep.
City Hall Department, any questions about this or concerns?
There was much discussion at the Planning Commission regarding the board's amendment to condition number 3. They changed the opening of that condition to the applicant shall coordinate with Capital Area Greenbelt regarding the retention of the Greenbelt across the property. This will retain a recreational amenity for the community at large, will provide a walking, biking route for residents to connect to the surrounding communities, and the city overall, as the applicant notes, many will not own vehicles and will maintain an ecological buffer along the river. Frankly, the Law Bureau is concerned that the language that shall coordinate is, frankly, a government overstatement, overreach, which, while we would certainly defend an allegation of a taking, it creates an issue that doesn't exist at the moment. The government is not in the business of telling landowners they must enter into an agreement with another party. And I reviewed this with the mayor this afternoon. She was in agreement that the city's not in a position to be discussing a taking on behalf of the Greenbelt. She's looking for a negotiated solution as well. Of the parties, I think everyone takes the parties at their word. There's a good faith negotiation undergoing. It's complicated by the location, by the multiple property owners, by the utility easements, by the road that was put in, and not getting to a solution yet. Two of the entities nearby are government entities that have their own interest, one at the county level, one at the state level. So it isn't calling for an agreement. It's just the parties aren't there yet. I think the mayor's office has probably been in 25 discussions in the last 2 years trying to come to a resolution for everybody. But you know, I will note, this is a zoning hearing. I don't know if a soil sample's been taken yet for this property to figure out where the building can and can't go, whether the next property is surveyed to know where those buildings can and can't go. So there are a lot of moving parts for land that was long abandoned and that was industrial. But we believe the original language of the original proposal should be returned from the Law Bureau to avoid any leaving open a question that the government intends to vest a right that does not exist at this time.
Right. And let me just, okay, so, you know, once again, it has to go through, you know, obviously land development and that type of thing. So whether any of the plans are really where it's going to be regardless, right? Yep. And right, that was essentially put in there, the shall after the planning commission. I understand, at least, you know, initially the planning bureau did put, you know, should, may have thought shall, but regardless, you know, it's something that they certainly will, you know, will discuss, but understood, and Attorney Grossman, yep, understood, is, you know, as well, and that's what I intend to, advise this board on what I, you know,
I
my,
would point out that the language that it will retain similarly raises issues.
what,
And that was in condition 3.
And will retain, I see. Will retain recreational amenities? That's
Yeah.
what your question?
And I think they just took on that different meaning when the sentence was modified, sitting
sounds
in
like
that
it,
room, yes.
right, yeah. Right,
Yeah,
it
that- I
wouldn't be
mean-
like anybody's removing anything, it can technically get down to the word of what is used and the legal implications of that, so that's what we will, you're right, need to discuss, so.
Well, I was just gonna say, as the person who wrote that condition, this will retain did not refer, was not connected to the shall coordinate. It was more like in the presumption that the greenbelt was maintained across the property in whatever format, it would retain that. So it was more like a description of a future condition with the presumption that a solution would be found, not to be connected necessarily to the should
Understood.
coordinate.
Okay, understood.
Jeff, most of the time, the green belt, the maintenance of it doesn't, it's basically volunteer. Stop me if I'm wrong. It may abut or it may cross different municipalities and territories, but the support of it is up by a private, basically a nonprofit private organization, correct? Stop me if I'm wrong.
That's correct. And perhaps the individuals, Mr. Hill can clarify further, but as far as I know, they are the primary maintenance and organization that does clearances when trees fall, for example.
That is one of our primary missions. We do receive some financial support. So for example, the city provides us some funding on an annual basis to do invasive weeds and some other things like that. We also qualify and have pulled in millions of dollars in DCNR, PennDOT, DEP, and other grants to do various improvement projects. We work in partnership with Susquehanna Township, where they just repaved a small portion of the road because of invasion of roots. So it's a mix of things, but yes. A study done last year by the Pennsylvania Environmental Council found that we were offloading a couple $1 million a year in what would otherwise be municipal maintenance of a recreational facility by the volunteer work that we do.
Sir?
I'm just letting him.
Okay.
Excuse me.
Maybe I have a question, and before we get to the question and answer, this is based off of the conversation. You've had a copy of this, right? You've seen this plan?
Yes.
And currently, the green belt crosses the proposed area for the houses that you're building there, the comfort homes. It cuts through that area proposed. Well, it currently, right now, cuts through it.
No.
The red line.
Currently, the Greenbelt access stops at the northern property line because of the construction fencing that was installed originally for Veterans Outreach. Its licensed area across the PennDOT property also stops at that border. The actual Greenbelt Trail before Veterans Outreach, that cross trail, nobody is really certain about the origin of. It circled around the southern base. Greenbelt may have maintained it, but the original property, which goes back to the steel mill, had a trail around it.
So there's no surveyor mapping for that area, for the green belt at all?
There was not. That was, both pieces were carved out by volunteers with the permissions that we were granted. And really both pieces were part of the trail. The one that was the longer loop down through what's now VOPA, and then this angle, which is popularly called the shortcut for obvious reasons. And it's correct as well, it's currently closed based on the construction. That closure actually occurred last year when the utility work began for VOPA, and we've been using the detour out on Sycamore Street since.
Okay. The second piece of this that I was going to ask, with their proposed realignment, it cuts through the bottom part of of the property in question. I may get in trouble for asking this, what's the issue? Well, again, but from a collaborative standpoint, what would be the issue if they're gonna reroute it to the border of your property, and now, I can understand the questions of liability, but you're being relieved of liability.
Security is one issue, but it doesn't solve the problem because the belt needs access to cross some property.
Yes.
And it needs access at the top. If we go back to the sketch plan, which is under, I think it's underneath that. No, it's on the easel. Even if they were to get across here, that property up there to the bridge is not owned by will not be owned by the foundation. That's another property owner. So, who's not at the table here. So, giving them access here alone doesn't solve the problem. And even if access was given on the foundation's property, once they get up here, they still are not connected to the bridge.
Their existing path cuts across that property at the top.
They have no legal right to that.
I understand.
So even if they are not, it is untenable to have a trail across a community like this. But even if they were given these rights, there still is a piece unconnected up there. So either all the property owners have to get an agreement, or it's just not viable. I would also point out that currently people are accessing that bridge and that through the right-of-way across PennDOT onto the access road, the Veterans Access Road, and they're forcing their way across that bridge, all without any legal right.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, on a couple of those points. First, we concede that there is a small tail, and you see it on our sketch, that little squiggle and then up over to the railroad bridge, and that still does need to be resolved. That's correct. We're just in that odd circumstance where we have no one to negotiate with on that remainder because the intent is that that property is being conveyed. I don't know the status of that agreement, and so we don't know with whom we're to talk. However, as we were engaged in prior discussions, and where the original proposal was to take it along here and along here, that same issue remained because it's still off of that property. And then the other point that I'd raised before too is whether we're in proximity right here and here, or right here and right here seems almost immaterial. We're up against the fence of this property in either case. And so the danger, the security issue is materially no different in either location.
It's the amount of exposure.
Well,
Number two, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to state that the issues before this board are zoning issues. Right. Only zoning issues.
Well, and I would point out that the retention of the green belt is actually a zoning issue because it is in section 7-301.47 of the zoning code, A7 of the zoning code, to increase opportunities for open space and recreational opportunities, including the completion of the capital area green belt, and to provide additional access to these amenities for all neighborhoods. So it actually is a zoning issue to ensure that at the very least, we're not severing the green belt, which would be in direct contravention to the language in the zoning code.
Nobody is severing the green belt. There are alternate routes for the green belt.
I was going to ask the law department one more question. As you said, no one, if the green belt currently crosses other people's land, has there ever been an issue raised because of the green belt path intruding on someone else's property?
Not that I am aware of, and I actually think that's frankly an academic question at the moment. But I don't think one solution, because a piece is missing, is not viable. You know, it's a who goes first question between the landowners, right? It's obviously it's conditioned upon the next property owner, saying that they're in agreement. But if everyone's waiting for one of the property owners to say it, it just sits still. So they would have to reroute it elsewhere from their proposal if they can't get through, right?
Right.
But that's their proposal right now. And again, if good faith discussions are going on, you know, obviously they won't be on this property if the other property owners don't cooperate down the road. And no one group can commit the others. But the Greenbelt can negotiate, as can the city, frankly, with one after the other, because it is in the city zoning code to make sure that the belt is complete.
Thank you. Okay, so anybody else from the audience want, because we're getting to our question and answer exercises, and I'll go to my left, Ms. Gray. Okay, Mr. Hobbs.
Good evening. I think one of the questions I had was answered about the comfort home, so thank you for that detailed explanation. I just was wondering, so what is the exact concept of the ghost parking spaces?
The ghost parking spaces were spaces that we were looking at to comply with the larger quantity that we were struggling with as to what was required, and that is shown in the darker area. So these would be set aside in the event we would need them as a result of a requirement which has not come to be.
Okay, alrighty, thank you.
And, okay, so I've got some questions. I know it's come up when we talk about the Greenbelt and security, but let's talk about security of the property, okay? The property is located inside, it's Harrisburg, so that would be, security concerns would be covered under Harrisburg Police Department. They would actually help patrol, but you have will you have private security in this area?
Yeah, our facility, like I said, is monitored 24/7. Internally, we have a passive closed circuit television system and perimeter security that's monitored 365 days a year, not only through video, but through personnel in the facility. The perimeter of the site outside of our building is also protected by surveillance. Once again, we're keeping an eye on what's happening within our fence line. We're not going outside our fence line to see what's happening beyond our line. The purpose of our security fence is to make sure that we define what that property is and we know who stays inside our property. We are certainly not, we're trying to keep folks out. We can't control who walks along the perimeter of our fence, who comes across that bridge, who walks across the right-of-way, who walks across any emergency roadway. We have currently, based on our security posture, we've been looking at closing this area here and gating it to be able to provide access on an emergency basis that will be controlled by the Harrisburg Police and Fire Department, but at the same time cut off access along this road, which we believe causes a point that we can't control. The area on this side along the road is a little different. This area is buffered by a building. The homes are secured on this side of the property. We have an existing feature along here, which is a retaining wall, which acts as a barrier. We have a difference in grade between the road and the upper area of the finished floor of the building, which also provides a barrier. So we feel that our comfort level in this area of maintaining this secure is better than being at grade along a unsecured area that butts up against a river. So with a fence, an existing physical barrier, and the natural grading of the site that we're anticipating in this area creates that buffer that separates the village along this area. In this side, we're not able to do that if folks are constantly coming through here.
Okay, thank you. My second question, and since you're gonna be, this was an industrial site at one time, so you'll have a land usage plan that'll basically, with the work of DEP, to look at that land to make sure that land is, you can live on it.
Yes.
Polluted, okay. Hypothetically, what happens if you get a negative response back from DEP? What's your position gonna be?
Well, we've already gone ahead and done some preliminary studies on this site to understand the nature of the soil, to understand the nature of what took place there 100 years ago. And that particular site was specifically selected as a result of the characteristic of that piece, so that we can mitigate some of the issues that you just mentioned. Pennsylvania is a unique state. It has quite a number of areas that are marginal. There are ways to deal with it, depending on the severity of the site. We're comfortable that what we have discovered in our initial phase 1 and phase 2 analysis and preliminary subsurface investigation, that we can mitigate the issues that are there and put together a successful development.
So that'll be part of your plan. If you would have to do remediation on the plan, remove topsoil or go down, that's part of your plan.
Our plan is to deal with the situations as it exists on that site to make sure that it's safe and that we can inhabit the site. Not any different than our neighbors to the south. And we have paid close attention to their site program and some of the due diligence, excuse me, some of the due diligence work that they did through their contracting resource to determine how to best manage that site. So the key is going to be balancing the site, be able to take from one site to fill the other, and try to figure out how to cap and make the site inert.
Next set of questions. This is, we say transitional housing. The second and third floor of the multi-unit building will be for residents. The first floor will be for support services, and the support services I consider to be city, county, veterans, federal, and those support services will be available to the occupants of this village 24/7?
Yeah, so we're not a transitional program. I think John may have mentioned that before. We are a permanent resident, so we will work with our partners to take those transitional veterans and move them when they're ready to go into a permanent living facility. What we'll do on the first floor, you're correct, those services will be available. We do, and Mr. Holcomb can perhaps elaborate a little further, but we do have partnerships with the VA. We do bring them into our case management network. We do provide offices if they need to. We do hire our own case managers to deal with the day-to-day issues of veterans. They are assigned a group of veterans that they're responsible for to make sure that they have access to all their benefits, that they have access to the benefits that they deserve and they've earned. Many of them are not able to acquire them because either they give up, it's too difficult, or they're not aware. So we provide that support on that first floor. We give them the case management, we provide legal support if they need legal help. We provide economic support in the sense that we make accountants available to them if they need to deal with some personal financial issues. We have a workforce program. We do partner with the local community to provide work. This is part of their reintegration. So we do come to terms with the local community, and we invite the local community into the facility to help these folks be able to take advantage of some of those benefits that are out there.
I asked that question because that's, I help run the Meals for Wheels program for Dauphin County. So we may have recipients if they move into that, in that facility. And I just want to make sure that stuff like that can continue. In that area, I don't think you'll have any grocery stores. So how do you, again, how do people handle their food and stuff in that environment? Since you're saying the transportation is at a minimum, you're dissuading people, or you're not encouraging people to have automobiles.
Well, some are, and we hope that they do get to the point where they can go and buy an automobile. Some may have bicycles to get themselves out of the facility. We provide transportation at no cost. If they need to get to a area of town, they can make arrangements and we will take them there. They need to go shopping, they need to go to the supermarket, we'll take them there. and arrangements are made to either pick up, bring back, or even if we've gone as far in some other occasions to provide car service to bring them to wherever they need to get to. Whether it be the VA, because many need, the important part is to get them to their service provider.
Okay. And my last question is the vetting process for the residents. Okay. Please, that, please.
That's a great question, Chairman. The vetting process is very rigorous. We're not, going out in the middle of the night and picking people up in buses and bringing them to property. This is a referral service. This is for folks who are either about to be homeless or homeless, couch surfing folks, people who are being evicted by their landlord. This is a very high threshold village where, again, we're not just running a bus down the street here and picking people up. We'd like to think that we're one of the most rigorous processes in this space, and we're proud that in the Houston property, we've been operating there for over 6 months and haven't had one single issue. So we want to make that commitment to the city of Harrisburg that we will keep that standard at a very high level.
Yeah, I mean, that's not what to say that if a veteran comes off the street in need, that may not be ready to come into the facility, because we won't do that, right? We will not place you in a community that is stable.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know who you are, and so there's a time for vetting that eventually will either accept you, or we could find a place for you that may not be our facility, whether you have some issues with your discharge or any other kind of legal issues that we may not be able to solve or at least mitigate in this situation. We will find a spot for you within our network, which is a national case management network that basically covers the entire United States, and we find those resources for you if you need them.
And all of your occupants or customers of the facility, each single persons, not family.
Correct.
It's all single. Any other question?
Yep, hold on. The ones like in the apartment that I think, and one of the things was you're mentioning younger and that type of thing. You're viewing those now, I mean, they could be there forever.
They could.
Okay. As the ones in the comfort homes as well.
The comfort homes, they could.
The plan is not to just, okay, they're kind of maybe in a better position as to where, when they got there and in 6 months or a year, kind of, move them along, correct?
That's correct.
All right. How about, hold on. Is that how you viewed this?
I mean, the way I look at it is, as the applicant stated, they will not kick anybody out. So this could be long-term, it could be short-term. It's very much up in the air as far as the length of tenancy of any single resident.
Right, okay. And I just wanted to make sure, yep, that
wanna make-
everybody is still on the same page, that's all.
One more quick thing. This is affordable long-term housing. These folks sign a lease with us. We would be not in legal right to kick people out. So I just want to make that clear. They pay no more than 30% of the income that they make via Social Security, via benefits. It creates an environment where they have skin in the game, so.
Right.
And the only reason that they would be removed is if a breakage of the lease, if it's term of lease, no substance, no alcohol or anything else, that would be considered, you could exercise notice to quit at that.
Right. So we do have rules. They do have to abide by them, or part of the lease, as you just mentioned. There are reasons why we would ask you to leave if you're being disruptive, if you're not being part of the community. We have those rights under the lease. But our intent is that you as an individual will say, I'm better now. I can do this on my own. I don't need this any longer. I can vacate this space. And there'll be somebody, unfortunately, that would step into those shoes to fill that space, because the need is there. So our hope is that without kicking them out, that they would make that decision on their own to say, I can do better.
Right.
That's what I'm going to ask you a tenant landlord piece. Your documentation, at least, your notice to quit, you will spell out, you will go into some type of detail of what could cause that to come into play?
I'm sorry, the cost?
The cause. The cause, like what would
The
be
cause,
about,
yes. There is a rule book that everybody needs to sign on to. They have to commit to see their case manager. They have to commit to see their psychological support counselor. They're required to, once they're set up, you need to make the effort to better yourself. If we're saying that you're just not doing what you need to do, then, we correct the situation.
Thank you. Any more questions? We need to take a brief recess. Law Department, any more questions from your standpoint? Good.
Sure.
Thank you. Okay, ready? Okay. Well, thank you, gentlemen,
And, Mr. Chair, well, since this was submitted, we'll just mark it as like C1, C1 exhibit, so, okay.
So this is,
That's
and
it.
you have a copy of this, correct?
Yep.
Thank you. Okay, so.
All right, so that's C1.
Back in session. I'd like to make a recommendation to.
A motion?
A motion to approve the request as made by the Planning Bureau with the conditions set by the Planning Bureau. So you
I think you mean the planning commission, the resolution passed by the planning commission?
Thank
No.
you.
No, oh,
He
set-
means
oh,
the
originally
Bureau.
set, oh,
No.
gotcha, gotcha.
He means
Sorry.
what was in the Planning Bureau.
I want the recommendation set by the Planning Bureau.
The conditions set by the Planning Bureau in his report.
Gotcha. I need a second.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and properly second by Mr. Hobbs. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. No opposed? Well, thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for
Thank
coming
you,
down.
Mr. Chairman and the commission, thank you very much.
And-
Go home. We have no
Right,
other
and I will
business.
get a written decision out and, let's see, was it, and Mr. Hill, you know, I'll make sure
It's a copy.
you get a copy of it, you know, as well.
So I have another business in front of the Planning Bureau. It's now, Zoning Bureau, it's now 8:35. I need a motion to adjourn.
Thank you. Second.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Hobbs made a motion. I guess Ms. Cray, you're a second.
I can second.
And we're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And law department. Thank you.
All right.